Good afternoon, and thank you for attending this session today. I hope everyone's having a good CA World. Yes? Excellent. So I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Schulte from Wells Fargo Home Mortgage. He's a senior project manager there, and what he's going to do is share his experience in terms of how they've implemented the principles from Scale Agile Framework in their PPM management system, CA PPM, to really help optimize resources to get the most value from a business perspective. So Shane, stage is all yours.
Thank you, sir. Do I have my little clicker? Here we go. Thank you very much. Just a show of hands, how many people who were here in the last session about the friction between Agile and project management? Okay, fantastic. As I was sitting out in the audience and listening to the same presentation, I was like, this is the perfect setup. Because we struggle with that same concept between strategy and execution, and we've been working on this. So what I'm going to share with you is our personal journey through that friction and share some of the things that we've done to mature along this path. Okay, so standard disclaimer, I'll give everybody a second to read this. And just a couple of disclaimers. So we are leveraging principles of Agile and we're leveraging principles of scaled Agile framework, but it's not like our executives decided that, hey, we really like what we see in Scaled Agile Framework, you guys go plug this in and make it happen, right? Same thing with adopting Clarity. We've been on Clarity for about the last 3 years, and it has been a journey in maturity. We didn't just turn everything on and everything worked perfect and we're out the gate and running, right? So these are things where we're identifying those major challenges that we have in front of us, and we're tackling them step by step, and we're hopefully realizing benefits and seeing improvement in our process. But it's not like we have a book. I like to use the analogy of project management. PPM is like raising children, right? You can read all the books that you want, but at the end of the day, every kid is going to be a little bit unique, and you just kind of have to roll with it sometimes, right? Okay, so again, I'm just going to share kind of our journey and how we leverage these principles to improve our practices. So just to kind of cover again on the agenda, I want to start and talk a little bit about who we are, where we are in our business cycle, why we implemented Clarity, the key challenges that we were faced, key challenges as defined by our lead executives and what they wanted us to accomplish, the immediate actions that we had to take, and then I want to show you some of the immediate benefits that we got solely because of adopting Clarity PPM. And then after the first steps, realizing the next steps that we had to go to continue our maturity, and summarize with a couple of points. Okay, so a little bit about Wells Fargo. We are the nation's #1 home lender. I believe that 1 in 5 home loans are originated with Wells Fargo Home Mortgage. 1 in 4 loans are serviced by Wells Fargo Home Mortgage. If you have maybe paid attention to the economy or the newspaper or read the Wall Street Journal, you know that we've gone through a huge financial crisis, a huge mortgage crisis. We've implemented CFPB. We've had to comply with national servicing standards. The regulatory environment has gone through the roof. We are, the fact of the matter is there is so much work that we have to do. It has gone through the roof to meet all of these regulatory requirements and keep up with the industry and make all the changes, and we just don't have the people like we used to. We've gone through in that financial crisis, we acquired Wachovia, the largest acquisition of a bank in the history in America, and so our normal practices could no longer scale with the demand and the type of changes we were faced as an organization. We had to seek out a central tool with central data and greater enforcement and governance for us to be successful and be able to manage that change. We like to use the term of managing change and delivering change versus project management. It's the same thing, but when you get into governance, projects mean something, maintenance means something, enhancement means something, but it's all change, and there's more of it than we can handle. So again, I'm going to talk about how we're using fundamentals to help us manage that change. So here's kind of a picture of the organization. Now, what I think and what I hope you take away from this is, as I've had a chance to talk with many of you throughout through this conference, I get the impression that we're all kind of in the same boat, right? I am in the middle here at this loan servicing level. I have an enterprise PMO above me that their goal is to make sure that all of the critical projects, the very strategic projects, the highly regulatory and legislative projects are very visible to our senior executives. We have very large expenditures, and at the EPMO level, they manage that budget, that very large budget of incremental funding that goes to fund these strategic efforts. They enforce a standard project methodology. We are required by law to follow a standard project methodology, right? So we have kind of a challenge between being agile and being waterfall because we are audited by CFPB and OCC to make sure our project methodology is being followed, okay? So that means we have very rigorous governance procedures. We're a bank. That's the environment that we live in. So how do you be agile? How do you deliver value quickly in this type of environment? Again, my role here is in the middle, loan servicing. So below me, I have 7 PMOs that align to business areas, whether it's tax or escrow or cash or whatever you want to call it. And each of those groups tend to have several work streams below them. So 6 sub-PMOs, maybe about 30 work streams, right? We've got about 1,000 projects, about 1,200 users. So kind of in the same ballpark here. We adopted Clarity to help us at the top of the house. It was driven top down to address these issues. For us, though, the critical projects and the major funding efforts were really only a subset of what we needed to execute and deliver on, right? 80% of our projects, numbers-wise, didn't require enterprise funding. 95% of our efforts didn't require formal enterprise audits. We didn't want to weigh down all of our efforts when that audit criteria wasn't necessary. So we have to work up with enterprise to make sure we're following all of our governance, and we need to listen to what's coming up below us to help us enable our teams to deliver fast. Because at the end of the day, our customers are the people that serve our customers out in America on Main Street, right? We've got to be able to turn this stuff around, deliver value for the business so that we can remain competitive in the market. Oops, sorry about that. Okay, so that's kind of the environment we're in. Our executives said to us, the PMOs, okay, we went out and we bought Clarity. You guys told us this is what you needed to manage change, but this is what I need from you, right? And I'm sure you guys probably have had this conversation. Our executives don't really want to hear project names. They don't want to hear status reports. They want to know, how much money are we spending, right? What am I getting for all of the money that we're funding? Are we investing in the right things? What are we investing in? How many people do we have? Are we optimizing all our resources? Why do you keep coming to me asking for more resources? I don't have money for more resources. How well do we execute projects? Because I'm not happy with the projects you're executing today. Can the business absorb the change? This is something new that there's so much demand that the business, on one hand, is saying, I can't possibly change my procedures to support change anymore, but I need you to do these 4 things, right? And all of this we're trying to roll up. And then, do we realize the promised benefits? So you told me that you needed A, B, and C to achieve D, E, and F. At the end of the day, did I get D, E, and F? And we're being asked to use this benefits realization in the intake process up front to say, the last time you asked for $1 million, you told me you were going to get this. No more money until I get what you said you told me you were going to give me. So these are the immediate actions that we took. Now, all of these 3 things, we accomplished in about the first 15 to 16 months of our implementation. The first thing that we did was track all of the work. We needed a visibility into everything that we were doing. That includes all the big projects, that includes all the little projects, all the administrative work, all of the resource-only kind of support categories. Now, as you can imagine, down below in the pink section is our previous conditions. And I'm sure like all of you were tracking the big stuff because that's where the visibility was, but you had your small projects and SharePoint lists and Excel spreadsheets or homegrown solutions or somebody built an Access database. None of the support work is tracked, 1,200 resources, and we could really only count for about 20% of their workload in enterprise scale projects. So we had to track all of the work. They wanted us to categorize all of that work into a business reason or a business driver. Okay? Now for us, our major business drivers are regulatory. Major percentage of everything we do is because of legislation. Mandatory. There's things that just happen. We have a lot of vendors. They change their interface. We have to adjust. Something breaks, customer impact, there's a defect, you just have to do it. There are things that we want to do. Strategic work. We want to continue to push forward. We want to find opportunities to reduce costs or reduce fees or increase revenue, and those are positive ROI driven. Before, the way we were categorizing work was based on governance. How big is it? What is the risk? What is the cost? How much money do I have? The categories always kind of continued to drive around. The drivers were not business drivers, they were governance drivers, right? And then we had a separate business tool that was not necessarily integrated in reporting, so we had one system that we'd ask people to complete a business case, and yet it wasn't included in the clarity, so we couldn't kind of join the tools together and figure out what we're working on. And then the other thing was track all of our resources. So again, we had about 1,200 resources. The rule was all of the resources go into clarity. We found people that we didn't know that we had. We had lots of discussions around, well, these guys are kind of working on this, I don't want you to track them. Nope, all resources into the system. Everything that they're working on, whether it's resource only, administrative, I want to know what every single person is working on. And if they're not allocated 100%, that's great, right? But we need a reasonable understanding of who everybody is with consistent roles and everything that they're working on, okay? We are not doing time tracking, and we decided that that was not a level that we needed yet in our maturity adoption to understand where our resources were spending their time. So we are really just using the resource allocation screen at a percentage level only, and we are using current months for current allocations, and then we expect everybody to forecast out through the end of the year, at least 6 months in advance. And that is to the level that we need, okay? Before, as you can imagine, absolutely no capacity planning, resource planning. Everything was done in SharePoint, Excel lists, if at all, okay? This is what we got after we adopted these three things. Wrong button again. Now, I really like the story that this tells, and we're becoming more and more data-driven because of this stuff. On this side here, this is the individual PMO level, right? And what you can see from here is individual PMOs are driven by different business drivers. Not every one of our lines of businesses have the same priorities or considerations that they need to address. And that's apparent, right? You can't manage everybody the same. One size does not fit all. Over here, though, is a trend. Now, if you look at the information, you'll see that for the first 5 months, we basically argued about what's important. And there was a lot of discussion around that big line, which was uncategorized at the top, right? We couldn't categorize up to 60% of our work because it didn't fit some of our narrow categories. So and that scared a lot of people. Where's 60% of your work on what? So we expanded that, and we started to track some other things like, again, we ended up with regulatory, mandatory, strategic, positive ROI, uncategorized, and then this other category, which is there is a good reason for doing it. It's just not a servicing level reason. It may be a line of business strategy, but you had better have a good reason for it. Now, what I also really like about this slide is that you will see that from June, July to August, there's improvement in our portfolio allocation. Our executives never had the transparency into where we were spending our money, how much it was costing them, and as soon as they had that, they were like, well, we need to fix this, right? We need to start working on the right things. Instant behavior change. I have information from September and October. I'm the guy that does the reports. It has only gotten better and better and better. So that was 12 to 15 months, and we're already seeing the benefits of implementing Clarity as far as true portfolio management, right? When we first started, kind of to stress again, we implemented Clarity. The impetus was get your projects in Clarity, manage your projects correctly. And now we're using the data in Clarity to show us these key drivers so that we can change our behavior. Okay, so great stuff, not done yet. All right, now that we have this, our executives and our leaders are now saying, that's great, we need to continue to look at these categories like this other category, break it down. But now I need you to tell me, how well do we execute projects? Because I'm tired of seeing these status reports that are read, I'm tired of missing milestones. So, and when they say, how well do we execute projects, they're not talking about necessarily time, schedule, scope, and dollars, budget. They're talking about productivity, deliver more with less, at a very high rate of quality, right? Also, we still need to address, can the business absorb the change, which is again around what are we delivering? And do you realize the promised benefits? Okay, so let's talk about our little area again. So in servicing, this is not an easy solution to crack, right? We have multiple PMOs, we have several work groups, we have a very user base, different methodologies. We may have a standard project management approach, which is standard SDLC lifecycle requirements, design, development, test. But we have some people that are doing Agile, we have some people that are strict waterfall, we have people that do a combination of both. We have groups of people that disagree on the true definition of Agile, right? So from my level, I'm not able to dictate at a low level how they need to manage their projects, but I have to measure performance with the goal of showing people their performance, compared to other teams, so that we can learn, adapt, and adopt best practices to improve overall delivery. And this is how we're approaching this project, or problem. Now, what I think is really interesting, and I'm very excited about seeing the rally and the rally adoption, is whether it's a feature, whether it's a requirement, whether it is, we're trying at my level, we're trying to get out of this discussion of using what terms, what a feature is, what a user story is, because it's causing too much confusion. Our executives want to know, what are we delivering, right? What are the requirements, right? What does it take to build these things? How well, what's the level of quality of what we built, okay? We are using a functional requirement as our unit of measure, right? We are trying to get everybody to standardize on a common unit of functional requirement. If an executive says, I want artificial intelligence, you know what? That's too big. You need to break it down for me, right? And not to a lower level where the button needs to be green. I can do that in 5 minutes. So we don't have it needs to be 30 hours. We don't have any specific requirements. It is based on this kind of communication collaboration. Our functional requirement is something that takes about a week, right? And now that we have projects breaking down their functional requirements, we know some projects have 100. Some have 2, some have 1, some have less than 1, right? That functional requirement is also written in a way that it relates to the business value being delivered that the executive wants, right? At the end of the day, when we do our status reports, we have to put it in big business language so they know what they got. But it can't be in project management task speak. And so that level helps us out as well. Now that I know what my requirements are, I can start to determine what the development tasks are to build those and tie that to a type of component, which leads to better estimating models, which feeds back into a better planning. And then testing. Everything that we build, we run our tests against, and we're tracking defects as a first pass quality measure. So now I kind of want to highlight some of the numbers down below. So functional requirements, again, kind of that feature level, but the detailed requirements can be whatever they are. And you see that we're now able to kind of track requirements per month per developer, which is about 20 hours per requirement, which is right about where we want. This is one team, by the way, okay? So now I have a productivity measure, and I potentially have a cost measure per functional requirement. And I can use this to compare team to team to team. Now I know some people don't think that's a best practice, but I use it as leverage. Okay? Tests and defects. I will tell you that what we see from the data is that our Agile efforts are almost 5 times as productive as far as what they deliver, and the first pass quality measure is 92% compared to about 70 to 75% on our waterfalls, which means a lot less rework, okay? Production issues and customer impacts, this is actually a huge driver for us. We cannot impact our customers. We are a financial industry. If you miss a statement or misapply a payment, that has a immediate financial impact to our customers, and that's all kinds of red flags, okay? So how does this Agile, scaled Agile PPM thing kind of relate? All right, well, if anybody has a chance, or is anybody is familiar with scaled or not familiar with scaled, I would highly recommend you go to the website, Scaled Agile Framework. It's fantastic, but what we are seeing is our PMOs are doing true portfolio management now that they know where they're spending their money and how many resources they have and the constraints that they have, which is basically at the top of the Scaled Agile framework, right? And it is driving us to work on the right things at the right time with the correct types of resources. And then as we look at the lower level performance execution measures, we see actually kind of an added benefit that as projects come into the pipe from the top, we're restructuring those projects in clarity from our masters to our subs so that that critical functionality, the architecture that needs to be in place is done earlier because we know that's more expensive and more critical, and we can deliver those things with higher levels of governance successfully. But once we get through that governance hurdle, then we can shift down into these more agile types of product development, right? Bells, whistles, make it faster, make it cooler, make it more user-friendly. But that architecture and those major capabilities, we tend to do those at a higher level of governance. So the combination between the two, each side is actually kind of influencing other, and we're still in our initial stages, but we're already seeing some benefits of tracking this information. Okay, final thoughts. Summary, what have we learned? We have learned that both Clarity and our Agile implementations, very complex, lots of debate, lots of issues to talk about. We were successful in making progress because we focused on the basics, the simple blocking and tackling, right? We tackled what is the work, what is the resources, what are they working on it, why are we working on it? Simple questions, and did our absolute best to do as much as we could. 80-90% good enough was good enough for us. We did not strive for perfection, we strived for progress. Okay? The other thing is maturity takes time. If you are not good at the basics, you will not be successful in the long haul. And we were lucky to have executives that understood that and had patience with us as we were getting the basics down. And we are seeing the benefits of those efforts now. Okay? And then the last one I would say is that the data don't lie. We had a very significant challenge after we had all of this information in a common tool, and we were presenting it back to our executives and our portfolio managers. They're like, well, there's something wrong with this data because this is not what we're doing. Well, it's your data. I'm just pushing it out of the system. So it took a good 6 months to develop the trust with our leaders that it was accurate, or we will work with you to reflect the story that you need that you want to tell within, the strategy, the organization. And since we've built that trust, now they can't get enough. Now they want more. Now I don't have enough people to get them all the data that they want, because they want quality measures and they want productivity measures and they want to know this and they want to know that, right? Which is exactly where we wanted to be when we began with. We have taken some very simple steps, and we are migrating and evolving into a very, very data-driven organization. Now, for us, we are using HP ALM to track our requirements because we have to have the details. We're using Jira to track our development tasks. We're using HPLM to track tests and defects, and we have some other subsystems. So we've been working on this for last year. I am somewhat jealous that they're coming out with this Rally integration, and I would have loved to have had that about a year ago, but there's always opportunity. We have other measures. I guess the point that I'm driving here is that Clarity has provided us the platform to make this possible, and we're very happy with that. Okay? We've got about 3 minutes left. James, I think I'll turn it over to you. And if we have any time for questions and answers, we'll be right over here.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.